Five friends left a basketball game together. None of them had any reason to disappear. They were familiar with the area. Their car was found abandoned on a mountain road. The strange part? The car wasn't damaged, it still had fuel, and it could have been driven away at any moment. Months later, investigators discovered the first body, then another, then another. But the biggest mystery wasn't how they died. It was why they had walked deep into the freezing wilderness in the first place. Even stranger. Inside a nearby emergency shelter was enough food to keep them alive for months. The food was untouched. The heating system worked. Warm blankets were inside. Yet one of the victims slowly starved to death. Only a few feet away from everything he needed to survive. To this day, no one can explain what really happened to the Yuba County Five. Was it an accident, a crime, or something far more disturbing? Part 1. The night everything changed. 5 friends, 1 basketball game, 1 car, and a mystery that has remained unsolved for nearly 50 years. On February 24, 1978, 5 young men left a college basketball game in Chico, California. They were excited, laughing, talking about the game they had just watched. The next morning, they were supposed to compete in their own basketball tournament. Their uniforms were neatly prepared. Their families expected them home that night, but they never returned. Days later, police found their car. It wasn't wrecked. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't stolen. It was simply sitting on a lonely mountain road, nearly 70 miles away from the route they should have taken. The engine could still run. There was fuel in the tank. Nothing suggested a mechanical failure. So why did 5 young men abandon a perfectly working car in the freezing mountains? That question would become one of America's strangest, unsolved mysteries. And the answers would only become more disturbing. To understand what happened that night, we first need to know who these 5 men were. They weren't criminals, they weren't runaways, and they certainly weren't experienced hikers. They were close friends from Yuba City, California. 24-year-old Jack Madruga loved driving and took great care of his car. William Sterling enjoyed sports and rarely missed a basketball game. Jack Hewitt was known for his cheerful personality. Ted Wire was determined to prove he could live independently. Gary Mathias was different from the others. He had served in the military and had struggled with mental illness in the past, but according to his family, he had been doing well. Despite their differences, the 5 friends shared one passion: basketball. It wasn't just a hobby. It was the highlight of their week. That Friday night, they traveled to Chico State University to watch a game together. Witnesses later described them as happy and relaxed. Nothing seemed unusual. After the game ended around 10 p.m., they began the drive home. The trip should have taken less than an hour. Instead, something caused them to drive deep into the mountains, somewhere they had no reason to be. No one knows why. The road became darker, colder, more isolated with every mile. Hours passed. No one heard from them again. The following morning, when the families realized the 5 men hadn't returned, panic quickly spread. This wasn't like them. They always followed routines. They always informed their families if they were going somewhere else. But this time, there was only silence. Police launched a search across Northern California. Officers retraced the expected route. Hospitals were contacted. Friends were questioned. Nothing. Then, several days later, search teams made a discovery that changed everything. Jack Madruga's light blue Mercury Montego had been found. It sat alone on an abandoned mountain road surrounded by snow. The doors were unlocked, the keys were missing. The car showed no signs of damage. Investigators tried starting the engine. It started. There was enough fuel left to continue driving. The tires weren't stuck. The vehicle wasn't trapped. There was no obvious reason for anyone to leave it behind. Inside the car, investigators found snack wrappers, basketball programs, and personal belongings. Nothing suggested a struggle. Nothing suggested panic. It looked as though the five friends had simply stepped out and disappeared into the freezing wilderness. But why? If the car still worked, why walk into the mountains at night? And more importantly, what were they running from? Investigators had no answers, but what they would discover months later would transform an already strange disappearance into one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. Because the car was only the beginning. Part 2. The car that shouldn't have been there. The discovery of the Mercury Montego only created more questions. Why had the five friends driven nearly 70 miles in the wrong direction? The road where the car was found wasn't on the way home. In fact, it led deep into the Plumas National Forest, a place none of them had any reason to visit. Investigators searched the area around the vehicle. At first, nothing. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood. It was as if the five men had simply vanished into the night. Then police spoke with a man named Joseph Shawns. His story would become one of the strangest parts of the entire case. Shawns told investigators that on the same night the five friends disappeared. He had suffered a heart attack while driving through the mountains. His car became stuck in the snow. As he struggled to breathe, he claimed he saw lights in the distance. Then he saw several people. He shouted for help. He believed they heard him, but instead of coming closer, they walked away. A little later, he said he also saw a woman carrying a baby. Then everything disappeared into the darkness. Investigators couldn't confirm his story, but they couldn't completely dismiss it either. Could those people have been the missing five friends? Or had Shawns seen someone else entirely? The mystery deepened. Search teams expanded their efforts. Helicopters flew over the mountains. Volunteers searched the forests. Dogs followed every possible trail. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Still, nothing. Winter slowly came to an end. The snow began to melt. Then, nearly 4 months after the disappearance, a group of motorcyclists exploring the forest made a shocking discovery. Hidden deep in the wilderness, they found a small Forest Service trailer. The door had been forced open. Someone had been inside. Investigators rushed to the scene. What they found would become one of the most disturbing discoveries in the history of American true crime. Inside the trailer, lying on a bed, was the body of Ted Wire. But that wasn't the strangest part. Around him were military food supplies, enough canned food to keep a person alive for months, warm blankets, a working propane heating system, dry clothing, everything needed to survive. Yet Ted had died from starvation and exposure. How could someone slowly starve while surrounded by food? The answer only made the mystery even darker, and outside the trailer, search teams were about to find even more heartbreaking evidence. The Yuba County Five Part 3. The Shelter in the Wilderness. Investigators carefully searched the area surrounding the trailer. Within a short distance, they made another heartbreaking discovery. The remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found in the forest. Both had died from hypothermia. The freezing temperatures had claimed their lives. Not far away, search teams found the bones of Jack Hewitt. Animals had scattered many of the remains, making it difficult to determine exactly how he died. But investigators believed exposure to the harsh winter conditions was the most likely cause. 3 of the 5 friends had now been found. Ted Wire had died inside the trailer. Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt had all died outside. That left only one person missing, Gary Mathias. Unlike the others, Gary had never been found. Not a single bone, not a single piece of clothing, nothing. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. But the trailer raised even more disturbing questions. Investigators discovered that Ted Wire had survived for weeks after entering the shelter. Medical experts estimated he had lost nearly half his body weight before he died. Someone had wrapped him in blankets. Someone had cared for him. Someone had tried to keep him alive. Who, if Ted was too weak to survive alone? Who had been with him? The answer seemed obvious. At least one of the other missing men must have stayed inside the trailer with him. But then another mystery appeared. The shelter contained enough military emergency food to feed several people for months. Hundreds of cans remained unopened. There were matches, warm clothing, books, even a working propane heating system. Yet the heater had never been turned on. The food had barely been touched. Most of the supplies remained exactly where they had been stored. Why? Why would starving men ignore food? Why would freezing men refuse to use heat? Nothing made sense. Investigators also noticed something strange about Ted's feet. He wasn't wearing his own shoes. Instead, he was wearing Jack Madruga's shoes. Somehow, at some point after reaching the shelter, the two had exchanged footwear. But why? Had Jack reached the trailer first? Had he given Ted his shoes before leaving again, or had someone else moved them? No one knew. Outside, search teams found no clear trail explaining where Gary Mathias had gone, if he had survived longer than the others. Where did he disappear? Some investigators believed Gary may have left the trailer searching for help. Others believed he died somewhere the search teams never reached. And some wondered if Gary had never entered the shelter at all. Every answer created 2 new questions. The deeper investigators looked into the case, the more impossible it became to explain. And then detectives uncovered another detail, one that completely changed how they viewed the entire mystery. Part 4. The Evidence That Changed Everything. As investigators pieced together the evidence, one question became impossible to ignore. Why had the 5 friends driven into the mountains in the first place? They weren't lost. Jack Madruga knew the roads well. His family insisted he would never have taken that route by accident. So what made him turn toward the mountains? One theory suggested they had been chasing another car. Another claimed they had witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. But there was no evidence to support either idea. Then detectives looked closer at Gary Mathias. Unlike the other 4 men, Gary had military survival training, if anyone knew how to survive in freezing conditions. It was him. Some investigators believed Gary may have led the group after the car stopped. Perhaps he believed there was a nearby cabin. Perhaps he thought help was only a short walk away. If that was true, one wrong decision may have cost 5 lives. But another discovery made the mystery even stranger. The Mercury Montego wasn't actually trapped in the snow. When investigators examined it, they realized the vehicle could probably have been driven away. The snow wasn't deep enough to completely block it. Even stranger, the car had almost no damage. It hadn't crashed. It hadn't slid off the road. It had simply been abandoned. Why would 5 men leave a perfectly working car and walk into freezing wilderness instead? The answer has never been found. Then another mystery emerged. Search teams found almost no footprints leading away from the vehicle. Heavy snowfall had erased much of the evidence. Investigators couldn't determine which direction the group had taken. Without tracks, the entire timeline became impossible to reconstruct. Did they leave together? Did they split up? Did someone convince the others to keep walking? No one knows. Years later, detectives reviewed the case again. Every piece of evidence pointed in a different direction. Nothing fit together. The abandoned car, the untouched food, the working heater, the missing man, the exchanged shoes. Every clue seemed to contradict the last. It wasn't just an unsolved case anymore. It had become one of the most confusing mysteries in American history. And just when investigators thought the case couldn't become any stranger, new theories began to appear. Some sounded reasonable, others were almost impossible to believe, but each one tried to answer the same haunting question. What really happened to the Yuba County Five? Part 5. The Theories for Nearly 5 Decades. Investigators, journalists, and true crime experts have tried to answer one simple question. What really happened that night? Despite hundreds of reports and thousands of hours of investigation, no theory explains every piece of evidence. The first theory is the simplest. The men became lost. Supporters believe they accidentally took the wrong road after leaving Chico. As the weather became colder and the snow deeper, they abandoned the car and tried to walk to safety. Eventually, exhaustion and hypothermia claimed their lives. At first, that explanation seems reasonable, until you remember one important fact. Jack Madruga knew the area well. His family insisted he would never have driven into those mountains by mistake. Even stranger, the road offered several opportunities to turn around. Yet the group continued deeper into the wilderness. The second theory focuses on Gary Mathias. Gary had struggled with schizophrenia in the past. Although his condition had been stable, some investigators wondered if he experienced a sudden mental health crisis. Did Gary become confused? Did he convince the others to follow him into the mountains? No one knows. But many experts argue this theory has serious flaws. Friends described Gary as responsible. He was taking his medication. He had been excited about the basketball tournament the next morning. Nothing suggested unusual behavior before they disappeared. The third theory is far darker. Some believe the 5 friends encountered another person, perhaps someone dangerous. Maybe they witnessed a crime. Maybe they were threatened. If they believed staying in the car was unsafe, they may have fled into the forest. But, despite decades of investigation, police never found evidence of another suspect. No confirmed witnesses, no physical evidence, nothing. Then there is the biggest mystery of all, Gary Mathias. His body has never been found. If he survived longer than the others, where did he go? If he died in the forest, why has no trace ever been discovered? Some investigators believe Gary left the trailer searching for help and became lost. Others believe he disappeared somewhere search teams never reached, and a few people believe something even stranger happened, that Gary somehow survived and chose never to return. There is no evidence supporting that idea. But without a body, the possibility can never be completely ruled out. Every theory explains part of the mystery, none explains all of it, which leaves investigators exactly where they started, with more questions than answers. Part 6. An Unsolved Mystery. More than 40 years have passed since the Yuba County Five disappeared, yet the mystery remains unsolved. The official investigation eventually came to an end. No arrests were made, no suspects were identified, no final explanation was ever accepted. Today, the abandoned Mercury Montego is remembered as one of the most mysterious vehicles in American true crime history. A perfectly working car, left behind on a lonely mountain road. No signs of violence, no sign of panic, just silence. Then there was the trailer, a place that should have saved lives. Inside were military food rations, clean blankets, warm clothing, matches, and a propane heating system that could have kept the shelter warm during the freezing nights. Yet almost none of it was used. Instead, Ted Wire slowly starved to death inside the shelter. Medical experts believe he survived for weeks after the others disappeared. Someone had wrapped him in blankets. Someone had cared for him. But that person eventually vanished. Who stayed with Ted? Why did they leave? And where did they go? Those questions have never been answered. Then there is Gary Mathias, the only member of the group whose body has never been found. Some believe he was the last survivor. Others think he died somewhere deep in the forest where search teams never looked. And a few believe he may hold the key to the entire mystery. If Gary reached the trailer, he may have been the only person who truly knew what happened that night, but if that's true, his story disappeared with him. Over the years, countless books, documentaries, and investigators have examined every clue, every theory, every witness, every piece of evidence. Still, no explanation fits perfectly. Perhaps the five friends simply made a tragic series of mistakes. Perhaps they became frightened and made decisions that seemed logical at the time. Or, perhaps, there is one final piece of the puzzle that has never been discovered, until that missing piece is found. The Yuba County Five will remain one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Five friends left a basketball game expecting to be home before midnight. Instead, their story became a mystery that continues to puzzle investigators nearly half a century later. What do you think happened that night? Did the five friends become lost? Did they encounter someone on that mountain road? Or is there a truth that has never been revealed? Leave your theory in the comments. And if you enjoy true crime, unsolved mysteries, and real investigations, subscribe to Case X for more stories that remain unsolved to this day.